ready to roll. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say two big thank yous, okay? The first big thank you is actually to our audience themselves, and I want to say to everybody who is watching or listening to this anywhere around the world, I appreciate you very much for taking the time to tune into this episode, which is episode 565 of the Inspired podcast. Now, if you stayed with me for this 5 or 6 years or whatever it's been, appreciate you very much. But if you're tuning in for the first time, also appreciate you very much. And today, I'm sure you will get some inspiration and motivation. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Now, the second big thank you is to today's guest, who I'm very, very honored to welcome to the show from Dubai. And as you know, I'm in Cyprus, so we're neighbors today, guys. And today's guest, Rodrigo Michel, hopefully I'm saying that the right way, an animal behaviorist, animal trainer who has also has a degree in psychology and is a specialist in working with animals and understanding their behavior, has worked with dolphins, stingrays, birds, quite a diverse range of different animals, I think. And what really fascinates me about this man's story today is, as well as the practicalities of working with animals up close and personal and understanding their behavior, there's also an element of, I'm going to say, animal welfare, of empathy, and of the connection to conservation. Because even though, as I understand it, this is primarily in a zoological or zoo type of environment, that connects very much in my mind to the conservation efforts because, wonderful people like Rodrigo are keeping these animals alive, keeping them having a good quality of life, helping the general public to understand them better and have meaningful experiences with them. And it's really just beautiful work, is all I can say. So I just want to thank you, Rodrigo, my friend, for taking the time out of your day to have this little chat with me today. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an honor to be on the podcast. You were close. I pronounce it. It's actually French, so it's pronounced Michel, but I pronounce it Mitchell. Yeah,
Okay.
most when I was younger, using Michelle, people would, yeah, it's a girl's name. So kind of changed the pronunciation a bit over the years. But I'm very happy to be on and to share what we do in our industry, how our industry works, and how it affects not just animals under human care, but also animals in the wild. So that's I think that kind of helped bridge the gap for your listeners and for people who are maybe aspiring to do something like this. They have a more insight on what we do, how we do, and how it affects the other aspects of it. So once again, my pleasure to be here and to be on with you.
Well, it's a pleasure as well. And you're a very eloquent speaker, so we'll have some great topics today. Okay, and the name, yeah, makes sense. French, a beautiful language. So I will practice that some more. But okay, your personal story. I'm just going to start with something because even though we will get into like what I call the bigger picture topics of all of this, obviously people are going to want to know about you personally, how you got involved in animal training, behavior, and everything that you're doing. You've been a good few years in this industry, I believe. When I was looking on your LinkedIn, I think I saw 2012 on there, I think, but maybe it's even further. I
Yeah,
don't know. So, can you share with us a little bit about what got you into this industry sector in the beginning? And this also connects to people who are aspiring to do the same as well.
yeah. So my path is very different from most people in this industry. So most people have the story they visited a Sea World or a zoo as a kid, and they got inspired right there and then, and that's what they wanted to do. My path was very different. So I'm originally from the Bahamas. That's where I was born and raised. And growing up, I fixed small engines, right? So I would be the guy who you get your generator, you want it serviced, your lawnmowers, chainsaws, those type of equipment. That's what I did. From I was in high school, I would do it after school and on the weekends. It wasn't until I started to do some side work at a place called Paradise Island, which is where the Atlantis is in the Bahamas, that the office I was monitoring was attached to was the head office for the Dolphin Company, who were there. And the owner, came to me one day and like, hey, you're very pleasant, you're good with people. I think you'll be a good person to join our company. Um, At first, I was reluctant, but nevertheless, cut a story short, I ended up taking the interview, and there was a gentleman there by the name of Andrew Haley. And to this day, I always give my career, I give credence to him and his brother because to me, they're the most important people in my career thus far. Andrew, also Bahamian, we did the interview together, and I didn't have much interest, but he was so enthusiastic. And I asked him, I was like, bro, have you worked here before? Because everyone knew who he was. He's like, no, my big brother used to work here with the Dolphins, but he's now in Philippines. I was like, in Philippines? He's like, yeah, he's in Philippines. They're training Dolphins there. They're opening a facility in Singapore, and he'll be moving to Singapore. That was it. That was the light bulb moment for me because I was like, okay, this is something that I can do, and I can see the world whilst I do what I do. So from that point on, I took the interview very serious. Um, our first 3 to 4 months, we basically got paid to learn. So we would come to work, we do actual tests. We have information about the history of animal training, the concepts that are used internationally, different organizations that we had to learn. So it was basically a schooling process. Once we were done, we got our first certification that was accredited by AMPA, which is Alliance of Marine Mammal Parks and Associations, as well as IMATA, which is International Marine Mammal Training Association. So being able to have my name on a certificate that's recognized by those two industries, for me was a good start. And from there, I just kept learning, kept developing my craft, asked questions. My supervisor would always tell me, bro, you ask so much questions. I said, because I don't know, I want to be a sponge. I want to be good at it. If I'm going to do anything, I want to be good at it. And yeah, I pursued and moved from there. I did 4 years home. And the same gentleman that I mentioned, Andrew, his big brother was the manager in Singapore. His name is Rodrico Haley. He now works at Atlantis in Bahamas. He's the executive director there for their Dolphins at Dolphin Key. And at the time he was in Singapore, he's like, hey, man, I heard a lot of good things about you. And I was wondering, would you be interested to move to Singapore and work with the Dolphins here? I jumped at the opportunity, and I was in Singapore for about 9 years, working there. And then I worked at the zoo. And now here in Dubai, working with penguins.
Wow, what an amazing story. That is incredible. You know something? After having done like 500 of these, you get to a stage where I think, man, I've heard it all. I've heard these crazy stories, and then you hear another amazing story like that one. I mean, that is an amazing serendipity, in the sense that like a lucky break. Somebody up there likes you, my friend, to introduce you in that way
Yep,
to this wonderful career path that you're on. Okay. So then Singapore and now Dubai, and you've been over in Dubai like 4 months, you said, I think before we started recording. So you're definitely getting to see the world, which is very cool. Now you
yep,
mentioned the learning, the learning process there. You mentioned the learning process, but then when it comes into the actual interactions, I mean, starting still in the Bahamas and everything, the actual interactions with the animals, with the dolphins, and all of this. For people who are not familiar with this at all, I mean, I've been to dolphin parks and resorts and actually swum with them. When I was a kid, I was quite young, so I have had the experience. But behind the scenes is quite different when you're actually taking those first steps to actually interact with them. Can you walk us through that process? So you did those 3, 4 months, the learning, you were like a sponge, like you said, you're soaking up everything. So I want to learn all about this. And then, getting into the practical, what were some of your first interactions like with the dolphins themselves in those very
well,
early days?
well, the good thing for us was like I said, we did a training process before you actually do the practical, right? So you have a theory in your mind, and yes, theories are principles, and you do this and this the reaction you should get if you don't get this reaction. So you have all this in your head. When you do step to the animals for the first time and they do something that was not on, it's not on the sheet, it's like, okay, what do I do now? So that's one of the things I had to learn very quickly was the ability to adapt and problem solve without panicking, right? Because you go to the dolphin for the first time, the animal looks at you and is waiting for you to interact. And so for us, the reason we call it interactions is because it's a two-way communication. You give a command, the animal, you give instructions, the animal will follow the instructions. Sometimes they do not follow the instruction. But at the same time, the animal cannot verbalize to you why it did not perform or why it did not do what you asked to do or follow the instructions. So you have to now read the animal's behavior pattern to kind of figure out what's causing the break in communication. Right. And so we did that. But for us, we did get interactions with guests. So our guests would come down and get a chance to touch, feed, hug, kiss. We call it a dance where they hold on to the fins a bit and stuff like that. So one of the key things we focus on is anything that is a natural movement for the animal is what we want to incorporate with the guest. We don't want a circus, right? Because when you look at circuses, you eliminate the welfare aspect of what we do. So you don't want the animal just, there's some places who still do it, but that's not something that I'm a fan of, and that's something that our industry really pushes. So we're not surfing on the dolphins and doing backflips and that, because those are not natural reactions that animal will give. But dolphins would jump, right? Now, what we do is training wise, we would enhance it. So instead of the animal, what we call a porpoise, do a little jump like this, we can actually enhance it where the animal will jump higher, but it's still a natural movement that the animal will make, right? Stuff like speed swims, where the animal will have burst of speed to chase something, then it will stop. You can enhance it where the animal will have that burst of speed for a longer duration. So key elements that we focus on when I started was working with the animals using natural behaviors, and you can enhance them to some degree, but you just keep them natural and you use that to build your guest interaction program. So like I said, stepping down to an animal. One time I asked for what we call it a bow, where the animal would jump and do the up in the air and come down. Animal didn't move. I'm like, okay, maybe I gave the signal wrong. I tried again. Animal didn't move. So at that point, I assessed the animal. I noticed that it had a blister on its tail. So that blister indicates to me that maybe it would be painful if he were to do it. At that point, you have to adjust, right? You don't ask for it, you leave it alone. But that's why the behavior part of what we do is so important, because I think a lot of people have a misconception that animal training and working with animals in general is a hobby or some kind of magic trick. It's science. The principles we use for training are science-based. They're behavioral science based in psychology, which is why I study psychology. So operant conditioning, classical conditioning, observational learning, these are all learning concepts that we actually use with children with learning disabilities. Okay, so we use the same concepts. The only difference is our execution is different because we're working with people who cannot verbalize, which is the animals, whereas with people, they can verbalize. So that's why you asked earlier about working with different types of animals. Yeah, I think I've worked with about 23 or 24 different types of animals. The principles are the same. The execution is different. So what's rewarding for a dolphin is not so rewarding for a macaque, right, which is a monkey. Right? What's rewarding for a sea lion might not be rewarding for a macaw. So the principles are the same, just the execution is different.
Wow, that is fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating already, especially what you said there about the learning disabilities and the animals and that connection. Okay, for context, everyone listening so far, 23 different or 24 different animals that you've worked with. Can you share some of those with us? Some of the different species and some of the different, because I saw on your LinkedIn, like I said, you mentioned stingrays, you mentioned dolphins, I think you mentioned penguins, you mentioned a few different things, but there's a lot more, it sounds like, that you've been working with in your many years of experience doing this.
Yeah.
So can you mention a few of those different species, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So when I first started back in Bahamas, we worked with dolphins, sea lions, and stingrays. We call it southern rays. I go to Singapore, we work with only dolphins at the aquarium, and then eventually I moved to the zoo. The zoo is where things start to where it really started to broaden out, because now I'm not just working with marine mammals, I'm also working with terrestrials. And so that's like mass palm civets, which has a big conservation effort for them in Southeast Asia because they use their, sounds disgusting, but they use their poop to make coffee. I don't remember yeah, it's called civet coffee, one of the most expensive coffees in the world. But in some parts of the world, they actually just feed them the coffee beans and water. And then when they poop, they would extract it and they make coffee with it. So I've worked with those mass farm civets. I've worked with pelicans, different types of pelicans, from spot-billed pelicans to pink-back pelicans, great white pelicans, Australian pelicans, penguins. I've worked with 5 different types of penguins. Where I work currently, we have gentle penguins and king penguins, but back in Singapore, I work with African penguins, rockhoppers, as well as Humboldts. So you go to birds, I've worked with different types of birds. I work with macaws. I've worked with turkey vultures. I've worked with parrots, small parrots, as we call it eclectus, very small green ones. And then I've worked with, like I said, with bigger parrots, like macaws. Green-tailed macaws is actually the largest of the macaws. So my second largest, sorry. So yeah, I've worked with a variety of birds, and then mammals. I've worked with there's a particular primate called a marmoset, which this pygmy marmoset is the smallest primate in the world. You look at about 500 grams in weight for an adult. But I haven't worked with the pygmies, but I've worked with the actual marmosets who are about 100, less than a kg in weight. So work with long-tailed macaques. I've worked with bearded pigs. What else we had that I worked with? Reptiles, not my favorite, but we have a few reptiles that I actually had to interact with. Not my favorite. So we had a few snakes, some uh, pythons, some rock snakes as well. Yeah, but they weren't my favorite. Crows, I've worked with. Uh, I worked with mongooses, a hog badger, which is very, very rare because it's actually a nocturnal animal. I've even worked with rats. One of the projects I had to do was condition a few pouch rats. Pouch rats, Gambian pouch rats, what they use in Vietnam now to find landmines because they have a very great sense of smell. They can locate the smell of the powder itself, but they're not heavy enough to trigger the mine. So when they go to the mine, they would dig, let the person know there's a mine here, and then they would safely navigate and then remove the mine. So yeah, that's just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But I work on a lot of different animals.
Wow, that is incredible. That is very, very diverse. I love the diversity. I mean, I'm learning quite a few things here about the different animals as well. And what you were saying there with the landmines, it makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Okay, now another thing that I want to mention about you, personally, just so we don't skip over this as well, with the human animal, let's say that that we all are, is that when you move from the Bahamas to Singapore, that's a big leap. That's a big, there's cultural differences and there's all different types of things. Can you just talk with us about your personal adaptation to such a different place and somewhere that you obviously would never have necessarily planned to go, but when the opportunity came up, like I say, somebody up there had a plan for you. What was it like in terms of, let's say, the culture shock and the cultural adaptation, and if there was like a culture shock and some of the pros and cons, and just your experience of that transition to such a different place. Can we talk about that, please?
Yeah, yeah, sure. It definitely was a culture shock. So being from the Bahamas, Caribbean, you got the beach, lounge, a lot of tourists, a lot of activity. And then you move from that to a big city. Now, granted, because the Bahamas are so close to the US, we're able to see big cities often. But living in one full time is different from visiting, right? The benefit I had was when I got there, there were Bahamians there already. That's we call people from the Bahamas. So there was a community there of people who were who from where I'm from who were able to help me adapt. But that's even with that, the food was different, right? The way public transportation move is different. So I'm coming from the islands where most everybody drives to, oh, we got metros, we got trains, we have city buses that move, double decker buses. Um, Greeting people is different, So when I first got there, January 2017, you just see somebody, good morning, good afternoon, big city life, as you know, being from the UK itself, is not a norm. You don't just greet people randomly. So I had to adjust to that part of it. Okay, social, what are social norms? What is not social norms? So yeah, it definitely took some time to adjust. But like I said, the good thing was I had people that helped me to adjust. The biggest adjustments to me was food and social norms. Those were the two biggest.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, I thought of the food, and I thought of, yeah, I mean the etiquettes and the the whole. Well, I mean, you know about psychology, but applying that to people, the cultural psychology is very different. And then we'll do the same thing to Dubai, because not only have you taken one big leap of faith to start again in Singapore, but now you've done it again, and you've come over to Dubai very, very recently. I mean, how are you finding life over there in Dubai?
Uh, this one has been a bit easier, I guess. Once you do it once, the second time you kind of have a better perspective of what Even though it's a new place to me for me, you kind of have an idea. Okay, I would need this, and you can kind of use past experience to kind of further yourself and prepare yourself for future experiences. So this one has been a bit easier. The company I work for is very well known here itself, which is Margin Alpha Team. I work at Ski Dubai. The manager, and same thing with connections, right? And I think more than anything, that's kind of one thing I would probably want to highlight to your listeners is sometimes good connection with good people takes you further than money, education, hard work ever can. I'm a living, I'm a living, walking, testimony of that. The offer here I got was from the head manager. She reached out to me directly. Hey, we would like to have you on board. Think we can use your expertise. How would you feel about joining the team? So when I got here, there was a same thing. There's Bahamians here as well. We all in the group chat, so we communicate often. And one of the guys I work with in Singapore, he's now here, but working to Atlantis there. So we were able to navigate and connect for the first few weeks just to show me around. Hey, this is some of the social norms. I know you have social norms from home. I know you learned social norms in Singapore, but here it's a different set of social norms. Some of the food are different. So that kind of aspect, having somebody around to help navigate that with you is much easier than doing it independently. But like I say, what I probably my key takeaway from this interview for anybody: treat people the right way, build genuine connections, and you'll be surprised where those connections will get you, because that's what I've been moving through in this industry for 13 years. Connections.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and they say that, but it is so, so true. But I love the fact that you've taken that a stage deeper than just the connections, because, the feeling I get from you is, like I said at the beginning, it's a very good vibe, in the sense that, you're putting out like good intentions, and kindness, and taking an interest in people, and sharing your knowledge with people, and all of these kinds of things. And even though, like now today, we've met for the first time, I'm really getting that feeling of like what what we give out in the world is what we get back, right? And you're obviously giving out a lot of good things, and it's coming
Yeah.
back to you. And that's the vibe I'm getting, and that's a really, really, really good lesson, because people start off, especially in the workplace, they start off thinking, okay, what can I get? And the thing I'm getting from you is like a gratitude and like a positive mindset, and I want to learn, and I want to be a sponge, and I want to help people, and you're saying all of these things, and then that's obviously coming back to you like many times more, so that's a really good life lesson, and that's not even a question. I'm just saying that that's a really,
Yeah.
really good life lesson that you've shared there. So thank you very
Yeah.
much. Thank you. So, and also with the animals as well. I mean, I can see a connection there, because you obviously have a lot of empathy for people. But going back to what you said earlier with the animals, you have a lot of empathy for them, and I love that story you told me about, where the dolphin had like a blister and there was some issues there, and you noticed that. What are some of the most heartwarming moments that you've had? And that's the best word I can think of to describe this. When you had these interactions with animals, and it's like bridge the gap between species, let's say, because even the connection you made earlier with learning disabilities and animals and the verbal and non-verbal communication. You're really bridging the gap between the species. So, are there certain memories you have, positive memories with the animals that stay with you more than others? It's a big question after 13 years, but I'm just wondering if there's certain specific things there that stand out to you in that heartwarming way, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Last year, my mom passed away last year, August, and I was still in Singapore. She was in the Bahamas. So I went home for the funeral in September of last year. And I still have good relationships with the place that I started off, which is Dolphin Encounters at Bulagoon Island in the Bahamas. So I just reach out, hey, let them know I'll be in town, um, coming up for the funeral, but wanted to know if I can just come and see the animals, that I started with. Keep in mind, I have not worked with these animals since 2016. So that's 9 years, because that was last year. I get there, they told me, yeah, you come over, you always, we're always available. If you're here, just come. So I went and I saw some of the dolphins that I worked with 9 years prior. And there were trainers who were there who work with animals currently, and they just saw the reactions. And the animals went, some of the dolphins just went bonkers, a lot of vocalizing, jumping around. And the lady asked, she's like, how long did you work with them? I said 4 years, but I had them at their most impressionable years. I had them when they were very young, around, I think one of them was 2 years old, 6 and 8. So I had them when they were I worked with them when they were very, very young, but we did a lot of stuff together. So you're looking at 4 years there, 5 days a week, sometimes six, depending on man, if you short staff or not. And you spend all your time with these three particular animals. So when I got there and saw them and just saw the excitement, and I got teary eyed, man. I got teary eyed, because it shows that one, they remembered, um, and two, that bond was still there. And even though I don't work there, they asked me if I wanted to, just ask for a few stuff. And so I did some cool stuff that I conditioned them prior when they were still young, and they still remember them. And so one of the lady who was there, she's like, "Oh, I've never saw them do this before. I've never saw them do this before." And so that in itself, it was a proud moment, but at the same time, a very humbling moment to see that even though it's been 9 years, the impact made had lasted that long. So that was very heartwarming. But I said I got teary-eyed about the whole thing.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. I mean, I had that in mind to mention to you because I just, again, it was a feeling I had from you personally more than, the industry sector. But even though that's in the industry sector, it is absolutely beautiful. I'm sorry for your loss with your mum, though. I mean, I'm sorry, very sorry for your loss. I mean, I'm sure she was very, very proud of you, taking such a big risk to move around the world and, follow your dream and all of this. But yeah, that's tough for anybody. But even so, going back there and seeing your dolphin friends again. It's a beautiful story, absolutely beautiful story, and yeah, it goes to show. And this is something else I want to move into the topic because you mentioned earlier about the like the natural instincts that these animals have, and so in other words, you're not forcing them to do anything they don't want to do. It's not a circus. I like that distinction. Right, and that's a big part of why I wanted to do this because I wouldn't do an interview with somebody who's like in the circus side of it because apparently there's a lot of like coercion and negative things, whereas you're like working with the animals to do
Yeah.
what's naturally, what they're naturally happy to do. So I would like to go deeper, even though I don't have a really specific question. I would like to go deeper into the overall ethical process because you're treating the animals very ethically, and of course then that also the fact that you're educating the public, as well is I think is very important because
Yeah.
people learn about the animals. So what impact do you think that has on the bigger picture of animal treatment, ethical treatment, conservation? These are the sort of connected areas, if that makes sense, where I'm going with this topic. Thank you.
No, it definitely does. So the thing is, what a lot of people don't know is our industry is very governed. It's a highly governed industry. So, for example, for example, in the US, you have AZA, which is Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which is the highest zoo accreditation in the world. So you have in Europe, you have EAZA, right, which is basically the European version to that, European Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Um, Southeast Asia, you have the Southeast Asia Zoo and Aquarium Associations, and under those, with those bodies, you have higher bodies. So from a governmental standpoint, so it's very structured. What I think happens is sometimes there are some zoos who get through the crack in certain areas where they're not accredited. So those people don't have to do stuff like audits. They don't have to present stuff like data. So my thing to guests, I mean, to your listeners, and even when I meet guests, because we call them guests, people who come to visit where I've worked, is hey, if you want to visit somewhere, just do a little bit of research. It might take 10 minutes, but it's 10 valuable minutes. Is this place accredited? Who are they accredited under? What are those? What the accreditation place? What are their ethics? Because whatever the ethics that the organizations that you're governed under, that will be your ethics. Because if you don't align with those ethics, they won't give you the accreditation. And the accreditations are not a one-time thing. They do have some places do every 4 years, some places every 5 years, but they will check your data. How productive are your animals? What's the space? What's the diet like? Do you have vets on staff? What's the quality of the people that work with your animal, your trainers, your keepers? Um, the environment. If you are renovating, stuff like that, how often do you renovate? How often do you upkeep? All this information has to be given, even reproduction. Are your animals reproducing? Because reproduction is a sign of a healthy animal. So all these, stuff have to be put out there. Every like some places 4 years, some accreditations is 5 years. So they need a backlog for that whole time, that 4 or 5 years. If you and then once they get the data, they will actually do a physical examination where they would send representatives there to assess what's going on. So it is a more structured process than people know. But what happens is when you look on TikTok or one of these social media platforms and you see something that, oh, that don't look right, you know, and you think it looks fun, it's look entertaining, but how is it beneficial to the animal? So one of the things I was taught very early, and I still practice, and even when I lead teams, which I've had the opportunity to do in Singapore and in the Bahamas for a short while, I would always teach staff you focus on the medical behaviors first, right? Because those are the most important. Because animals do checkups, where some places do them every 6 months, some places do them every year. So you need to do blood exam, you need to do body checks, temperature checks, weights. All these things need to be done and maintained. So there would be the first set of trainings that you would do. And then from there, like I said, you use that, and then you can build up to what you do with how you decide to design or structure your guest interaction. But the key points is you want to make sure whatever the animal is doing, it is cooperative, right? And so, like I said, it's a science. I'm not sure how familiar you are about operant conditioning, right? But is a psychologist who, back in the early, I'm teaching a history lesson.
Oh, carry on.
But yeah, so his name is
Yeah.
BF Skinner, right? So Skinner started with what we call a Skinner box, and he realized, okay, he put these rats in this box. It has tunnels and stuff. It has a way out. But if you go to the wrong area and you get stuck, the rat would get a small electrical shock. So he realized over a period of time, the first time it took a long time, I took a few shocks, but it found a way out. Eventually, over time, it learned the pattern, the maze, it's so well that it can navigate without getting shocked and get out, right? And so he started to put theories behind it. So we do positive reinforcement, right? Where okay, the animal did something correctly, I would give it a reinforcement instead. So even terminologies matter, right? Instead of a reward, you're reinforcing a behavior that you want. So we have what we call antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. What we call ABCs of often conditioning. Your antecedent is what triggers the behavior itself, right? So whether that be a cue or a signal, if you want to call it that, with a dolphin, or with the child, it might be the parent shouting. So a parent shouts at the child cries. The behavior that you get is the crying, and now that crying creates a consequence. So the A is for antecedent, what triggers the behavior. B is the actual behavior, what's happening, and then C is the consequence. So for us, when we ask the animal to do something, we give an instruction. If the animal does not perform the behavior that we desire or that is associated with that particular thing, we now have the opportunity to create a consequence. So what some people think is, oh, they don't do the right thing, you don't feed them, you beat. No. What we would do is we pause for a few seconds, and then we start to troubleshoot mentally. Okay, let me try again and see if I get the same response. You try the second time, the animal doesn't do. Now you start to troubleshoot, okay, what can be causing this? Is there something in the environment? So now you start to think wide scope. Whereas for some people, like I said, they think, the animal don't do it, and then you just punish them, because we've learned with psychology and especially behavioral psychology that when it comes to punishments, it works in the exact moment, but it creates adverse long-term effects, right? Which is why parents today, they don't, when you go, the parents today they don't physically punish as much as they used to back in our days. Right? I mean, I'm not sure your age, but I'm 36. When I was young, I did something wrong. My mom and dad, now we take phones away. We were talking about technology earlier, right? So even the way that we decide to use a punishment is different. So I take your phone away, or I say, you know what, no social, no internet, or whatever the case is. So the way that we do it is different. With animals, we don't have that option of physically spiking an animal. So what we can do is, instead of using punishment, we troubleshoot to find what is causing the disruption in the communication. And then once we find that solution, then we focus on that solution. Okay, so so those aspects, but all that creates good welfare for the animal. It creates an animal who feels like they're working in cohesive, with a person, instead of I'm just here as a robot and you just tell me do what I just keep doing. No, I have a voice in this as well. Sometimes the animal don't want to do, and that's fine. Like even here where I work, sometimes I bring a penguin out. Penguin looks around and no motivation, don't want to do anything. No problem. You can go back. I'll bring a different penguin who seems to be motivated and want to do, and that's okay. Right. So we allow them to have a voice per se. They have input in what's going on as well. And with the welfare aspect, that's one of the things that's been highlighted for the last, I'd say, 5 years within our industry is input, output. Input is what we add to the animal's environments. Output is what information or behavior patterns or signs that the animal are giving us. The output is more important than the input. Where people go wrong is sometimes they focus more on the input. Oh, maybe if I give the animal this, this would happen. No, what is the animal telling you based on its behavior? So if I offer an animal a toy and it runs away from the toy, I can say, oh yeah, but I gave it a toy. No, it didn't interact with the toy. The toy seemed a bit aversive. So I think I need to take this toy away and try something else. That's more important than what you are actually doing. You have to pay attention to what the animal is saying to you, non-verbal, because it can't communicate to you verbally. So those are the things that help build what we call welfare. So that's where your ethics would come in, how much space the animal has, how often is the area clean. Some animals, for example, like rats, you should not sterilize a rat's environment too frequently because they need bacteria in the environment to keep themselves healthy. Right? I'm not sure if you saw the video with the macaque Punch who went viral with the teddy bear.
Yeah, I
Right?
saw that.
So people people loved it. Oh, so cute. Oh, as somebody who works with macaques in the past, I know that that's not good behavior that's going on. The social dynamic is bad because macaques are highly social animals. They're not isolated animals. They're not animals who are introverted. They're very social. You normally see them in groups. You normally see them engaging. Moms would carry their babies for a long period of time. Even when they travel, the baby would hold on to the stomach area as they move around to find food and forage and whatever the case is. So this young macaque is being isolated from a group. That's a social dynamic problem. That's now welfare aspect comes into place. Why is this animal being why is this animal being displaced from the group? What's really going on? So that's how I saw it. The rest of the world saw it as, oh, it's so cute. It has a teddy. But a teddy is not a natural social structure for this animal. A natural social structure for this animal will be playing with macaques. You can add a teddy as an enrichment, that's fine, but that should not be its main source of socializing. So like I said, even viewing stuff like that is very different. So, the welfare aspect and the way we work with animals, it's all about teamwork, cooperative efforts. You condition the animal to be comfortable to stand still and take an injection or lay down or have whatever posture that you need. You condition the animal to be there. Hey, here's a needle. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm gonna take a blood sample. You condition that. That's less stressful for the animal. That's less it's better safety for yourself as well as the animal compared to you trying to, oh, we need blood. Okay, hold them down and restrain and all this other stuff. And then, no, because now your blood sample is going to be messed up because biology comes into place. If stress is high, cortisol levels are high. Cortisol level too high, you can't get an accurate blood reading. So all these things play a role in how we go about our processes and the results that we get on the tail end. So for us, we realized the best way to do it is cooperative.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Rodrigo. That makes a lot of sense because it's a relationship truly, with the animal in the
Yes.
sense. And that's I mean it's interesting because the input and the output thing that you said there is interesting because it seems to me that you do that with people as well in terms of your career
Yeah.
advancement. There's an input and output, but definitely with the animals it makes a lot of sense and fundamentally describing the actual relationship that you have with them and the equality, I suppose, for a better word, in the sense that you're doing what's best for them and what's best for you, and there's give and take. It's a very, very good system, and I mean, I'm very happy to hear that. Now, the other thing with this that really interests me. Oh, and by the way, yeah, B.F. Skinner, I've heard of that experiment and some of these things with the
Yeah.
behavior. And obviously, you've done degrees and you've done like you've got way more knowledge. But I also, like as you can see here with all of the things I got, I read on all of these types of things just out of curiosity and you also learn more about
Yep.
people as well as animals and that relates to a question. I mean, how has this influenced the way that you deal with human beings? Because we think that we're separate from the animal kingdom when we're very much part of it. And things like the behavioral element you described there with the electric shocks or the children, you were saying about like not taking the punitive approach with the children and how that's developed in recent years and it's healthier for the children, etc. Your experience with animals will then change the way that you interact with people as well, or
With
influence or
people.
give you
Yeah.
more understanding. How can you share with us maybe, two or three sort of key ways that that's happened, that it's influenced your life outside of your work, if that makes sense, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I have three words: compassion, understanding, acceptance. Compassion because you put yourself in someone else's position, right? You know, yes, they might not be, they might not be the exact person you think they should be or whatever the case is, because you're meeting somebody for the first time, or you have people around you who've been around you for a while. So you just tend to have a bit more compassion and empathy towards people, especially when they go through hard times, right? Secondly is understanding. Everyone is different. And that's one of the joys I've experienced from traveling and working and living in different parts of the world is we have a lot of difference. We have differences, but we have a lot more in common than we have different. Yes, the differences are there. For example, I eat rice. You go to Asia, they eat rice. You go to Europe, they eat rice. So that's a common meal. Chicken, common meal. Yes, will there be some stuff like chasu and all these other stuff that might be different? Yes, but for the most part, we have more in common than we have different. But understanding the differences helps. It plays a big role. Here in Dubai, today is the first day of Eid. Ramadan just finished. I was in the Bahamas. I knew nothing about Ramadan, nothing about Eid. I go to Singapore. They do have a big Muslim community there. So you learn about stuff like Ramadan, you learn about Eid, you learn about the Indian cultures that's there, you learn about the Chinese traditions and Chinese New Year. Never heard of it until I went to Singapore, and how long they operate and stuff for that. So when you get a better understanding of something, you have a better appreciation for it, for the differences as well as for the commonalities. And then again, acceptance. Once you understand it, you have compassion, you have empathy, accept the differences. There's no need to try to change somebody to what suits you because we're different. Whether it's nature or nurture, there are differences. Somebody who grew up in one part of the world is going to be they can have different social ethics than somebody who grew up in a different part of the world. And with animals, like I said, using that with animals, if you judge a fish by its ability to run, you're going to look at the fish like an idiot. But if you put the fish in water, then you see the beauty and the significance of the fish. And people are the same. One of your guests, the lady, I can't remember her name on top of my head, but she has 10 world records with a wheelchair, right? If you just look at her and limit her to, oh, she's amputated and she's in a wheelchair, you never get to understand the greatness that she has. But watch an interview and listen to her talk, and you see what she's produced, and you're like, oh, she's out there killing it, man. She's doing it. She's making it happen. So you learn to accept, and like I said, those three words, man. You once you understand, once you have empathy, it makes it easy for you to understand. Once you understand, it makes it easy for you to accept. Because at the end of the day, people are all different, right? We have penguins, for example, 18 types of penguins in the world. Personalities are different. You can take 10 dolphins from the same grouping, you put them together, you're going to get 10 different personalities. And humans are no different. Not everybody from the Bahamas has the same personality or same traits, same likes and dislikes. Not everyone from US or UK, not because you might have some social parts of it that's the same, but individuals, that's the key thing. People are individuals, same way animals are individuals. And so, like I said, you have compassion and empathy, makes it easy for you to understand. And if you can understand, it makes it so much easier to accept.
That's beautiful. That is a beautiful description. I love that. I agree completely. Yeah, when you meet people from around the world, there's a lot more we have in common, and there's the principles are the same, but the specifics, the etiquettes and some of the details differ.
Yeah,
But it's a beautiful message, compassion. We all have the same traits inside of us, and we want the same things. We want to be happy. We want to be fulfilled. We want to be, experience love, experience meaning. So fundamentally, we have a lot more in common than we think we do. It's a wonderful, absolutely wonderful message. Okay, the last couple of things. So a couple of other things. I mean, in terms of your industry as well, you will have seen this progress because you've been doing this 13 years, and you were mentioning earlier about like the governments and the different organizations and the progression in understanding. And the cool thing about this is like, as you said, it's a science. And so therefore you're always learning more because science develops and deepens its understanding. So if we
yeah,
map your industry forward, say, I don't know, 5 years or 10 years or some period of time, it's arbitrary really, but some period of time of your choosing, what are some of your hopes and aspirations and dreams we can cover personally, but also for your industry sector as a whole in terms of the development and the growth and the public understanding, if that makes sense, because I'd imagine from 13 years ago to now, the industry is different. And so then
it's
if we put
changed.
that, yeah, this bound to
It's
have changed.
changed.
So if we put that forward, and there'll be some good things and some bad things, I'm sure. But if we put that forward, I'm curious about like what change, maybe some changes you hope to see. Maybe there's some changes you don't like. I don't know. I mean, we can mention those as well as any personal ambitions or personal aspirations that you would also like to share. Thank you.
Yeah, personal aspirations would to be to get back to leading a team, but not from a mid-management level, but to an actual management level. Uh, because at that point you have a lot more autonomy as far as SOPs and SWPs and structures and stuff. You have far more autonomy. One of the things I enjoy here so far is even though we do have our head manager and stuff, staff are given a lot of autonomy as well. So it's not like you want a rigid program A B C D all the time. Like you can be a bit more flexible and you can do more. Things I would like to see, and I actually started drafting this because it's something I actually do want to publish because we have publications as well for our industry, is going back to basics. And it sounds bad, but I would like for us to go back to some of the principles that I met when I started 13 years ago. Most places had a actual development program for staff before they would have worked with the animals and that sort of stuff. And it don't have to be a long period of time, but at least some kind of systematic progression for somebody who's coming in, whether they have a degree or not, because a degree in biology does not, or zoology does not teach you about behavior. It teaches you about the species. A degree in psychology teaches you about behavior, but nothing about the species. So I'm not saying go and get 2 degrees, but I'm saying when you come in the workplace, a more structured progression plan. Hey, we're going to start you off with this. You need to learn these concepts, learn these stuff. And then when you progress, you can move forward and be more effective in how you work with the animals. So lately it's changed slightly where because the demand is high, there's more zoos being built, it's more infrastructure, it's all parts of the world now. And so because of that, you have like a high demand. So you just gotta just get people, bring them in, try to get them on the ground as fast as possible. Which, yes, on the revenue side, that helps, but on the long-term effect, it's not the best, you know. And secondly is which the industry is doing now. All of the organizations are kind of starting to work together now instead of more separate entities, starting to work more collaboratively, which I enjoy because now we can use the benefits from one organization might be focused more on ethics and welfare, and one might be focused more on reproduction and environment, and we can pick each other's brain and just make it a big one big melting pot. And that's something that's the industry has been doing. And it's you have more joint conferences now than you had before. So before you just have ACA conference, ABMA conference, IMATA conference. Now you have joints. You have an ABA and a IMATA conference together and stuff like that. So that part of it, the unification and sharing knowledge and insight and sharing the data that we find within the science part of it, the research, sharing that and then using that forward. And one last thing, there are people who work in our industry in zoos and aquariums who leave and now work for governments. A perfect example of that would be Brad Andrews, he used to be the head chief zoological officer at SeaWorld. He's been in the industry now for over 50 years, and now he's working in Africa and rerouting, actually developing routes and rerouting elephants and rhinos so that the paths that the poachers would normally go, they actually are rerouting them now where these animals are naturally moving in a different direction to avoid the poachers. So without physically going out there and doing the physical training, but just through infrastructure, through conservation, through planting trees and creating more environment and rejuvenating ground that was lost and acres of land. But they're working with governments now, and hey, you know what? Poachers are coming from this way. How about if we can get the animals to go here naturally without any human intervention as far as being there physically with them, but just if we can, re this forest here, we can redevelop this forest. If we can acquire this piece of land here, we can set up different routes and stuff, and it's been working. So it's not what we do is not just limited to zoos and aquariums, but it's also on the conservation aspect on a global scale. So those things that's been moving forward. So I can see probably another 5, 10 years where that become more normal, and you have more people now working along with governments to build conservation and have these animals be here with us a bit longer.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad you mentioned that actually. I'm really glad you mentioned that because I in my notes I had about the conservation and aspect as well, and we've touched on that on and off through this conversation, but it's very important. That's a really good topic about how people leave with the understanding, with the education, with the empathy, and then they go into the field in different areas and contribute. But I also think it's very important to mention the fact that you have species in there, and I'd like to touch on this. So there'll be two more topics with this, and we'll wrap this up then because it's a good length for people to absorb. But I want to mention as well with the conservation aspect, how does it work in terms of the species that you have that you work with and then their populations in the wild? Because as I understand it, there are certain species that you're effectively yourself and organizations, people in your industry are effectively keeping them from going extinct, or keeping the numbers afloat to a certain level in certain instances, and there's a connection there with direct conservation as well. And I know obviously we want all of these animals to be in the wild, but at the same time, there's a lot of things, especially in the zoological element, where, and you mentioned reproduction earlier. You mentioned that reproduction is a sign of a healthy.
Hmm.
So what is that connection in the sense that you're, from a certain perspective, or your industry as a whole is contributing to, repopulation, keeping certain animal numbers alive, obviously educating the public, as I've said, so they're aware of the conservation aspects. I'd like to explore more of that bridge between conservation in the wild and your industry in aquariums and zoos and all of that kind of thing, if that makes sense, the connection that I'm making there. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. So there's a organization called IUCN. I think I said it correctly, or IC, but it's IUCIN. I can't remember the exact acronym, but what they do, they determine, they would list when an animal is the animal state. So whether the species is endangered, threatened to be endangered, stable, population beyond measure. Perfect example of this would be the California sea lions. So California sea lions, they live south from Baja, Mexico, all the way up to British Columbia on the Pacific coast, west on the west coast of the U.S. Before that, one point they were threatened to be extinct. There were about 10,000 that were accounted for. In 1972, they come up with the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The Marine Mammal Protection Act was put in place by government agencies in the U.S., and they made it illegal to catch, kill, just basically anything that would be harmful to marine mammals. Sea lion, the California sea lions is a part of that. 1972, you have 10,000. This animal is on the brink of being listed as, possible to be extinct. 2026, we have now 250 to 300,000 sea lions, California sea lions. So thing is, when we have animals under our care, people think it's just entertainment. There's a lot of aspects that go in what we do. There's research, there's education, and the research part of it is very important because some of the animals you can't get to their counterparts in the wild, but you have them with you. So you can do research projects with them and figure out, okay, for example, felines. There's an issue now with big cats numbers reducing. There's research being done by EASA, is one of the places that actually heading it, the European Association of Zoos and Aquarius, where they realize even within their own zoos that they have, the felines are not reproducing as fast as they should, or reproductions are not sexual, or there's even no motivation to reproduce. What they learn after a period of time from research is females go to estrus when there is male presence. So you just can't take a female and just put her with a male and be like, okay, 1, 2 days and then they're good. No, she needs to be in that environment for a period of time. And the more she's around that environment, getting the hormones and stuff like that from the male that she would smell in the environment and stuff like that, that would then put her in estrus, makes her more highly susceptible to be pregnant. So now that we get that research, we get the numbers, we get the data, we now can apply that to animals in the wild, right? Where instead of, you go in the wild and you go, okay, these animals aren't producing as much. Okay, no problem. Maybe we should try find a way that we can have more males and females together, in a certain area for a longer period of time. Now, yes, you cannot go in the wild and, build an exhibit or whatever the case is. But if you continue in a place that's sustainable and that's, that's poacher free and that sort of stuff, animals can thrive a bit, and then that would naturally take place. But everything we do, you do on research. That's why I said what we do is a science. So the behavioral aspect for the trainings and the stuff like that, that's science. The upkeeping with the medical, that's science. Taking the research that we have and then sharing that with governments and different agencies, that's also science. So a lot of what we know about animals now were not studied on animals in the wild. They were studied with animals under zoos and aquariums. So that's how somebody knows a penguin is monomorphic, which means males and females cannot be physically identified. You have to do a DNA test to do identification, right? So once you do a DNA test, you can see who has more Y chromosomes, more X chromosomes. Okay, this is a boy, this is a girl, whatever the case is. Flamingos are the same, macaws are the same. So we didn't just go down the wild and say, let's catch a few flamingos or let's catch, no. These were studies and research that was done because the animals are there, we have the access to them, we can do the research, get the information, and now disperse that information out in a book or a scientific journal. And that now can be presented on an upper scale to a government agency or whatever the case is. And then that can be put in place. Right now, we're having issues with the African penguins in Cape Town, right? The numbers are dropping. So what's happening? Zoos and aquariums are now they're taking certain people to go there, study what's going on, why is these animals numbers dropping, whatever the case is. And again, using research to build laws to try help increase the population again. So it's all connected, it's hand in glove, all connected. So, but there's a lot of science that goes on in what we do that people do not know. They just think it's just, like I said, it's a hobby, or you just like animals. Hey, no, it's a lot of science that goes on to do what we do.
Oh yes, they're definitely. I can understand completely because in many ways as well, the industry sector is like an ecosystem in the sense that it connects, as you're saying there, the connection to government, the connection to conservation, the connection to education, scientific journals, hand in glove, but they're all connected to each other. That's like an ecosystem of its own in a way, in the industry
Yeah,
sector. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm really glad that we mentioned the conservation to give people a deeper understanding and the deeper meaning of what you do, as you've already said there, beyond the entertainment and into the science itself, which is a very, very, very beautiful description as well, very eloquent. Okay, well, we've covered some good topics today. I keep these to about this length, about hour 15, because it's good that people can take in the information. But the important thing for me is that people then go away and apply some of the information that you've shared. Now, you gave some very good advice earlier on the making the right connections with people and all of that, referring to that topic for a moment. Before we close out,
yeah.
are there any other pieces of advice? Is there anything else you'd like to say to people who want to get into your industry or are in the early stages of your industry? Because you mentioned making the right connections. I would say people can learn from you, Rodrigo, that having a good vibe and giving out having good values, if you like, takes you a long way in life, and it takes you
Yes.
a lot further than just going after money and all of that. But is there anything else you'd like to say to people who are in the early stages of this career or are starting or considering, I should say, this career path? We'll mention that briefly, and then we'll wrap this up. But any thoughts on that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I would say learn as much as you can. Um, you know, like I said, curiosity, right? Just be curious, learn. Hey, why these animals do what they do? Or hey, I noticed you had a situation and you was able to, problem solve it. What did you look at? Learn as much as you can. Aside, and I don't want people to feel like, I'm just getting by just being lucky per se, but I've put in the work on my end as well. I've put in the work physically with what I've done and using skill sets. So work hard, but treat people with respect, treat people with dignity, regardless of who they are. Treat them the right way, and you put in the work, and you have the right attitude. That makes you more susceptible to people to value you and want to be around you. I want you to be a part of what they're doing. If you have a bad attitude, nobody wants a negative Nancy around, right? So if you work hard, you do the right set of stuff, and you have the right communication skills, and you know how to disagree without being volatile. Those things matter, because at the end of the day, people is the most precious commodity in the world. You need people. I don't care how much you can have $1 trillion. You still need to call somebody to come do your electrical work. You still need somebody to service your car. You're still gonna interact with people. You can't get away from people. So, prepare for opportunities. That's what I did. I prepared for opportunities before they came. I prepared, okay, I know if I need to do this, I need to get a certification in this. Okay, let me go get it now. I get it early, I put it in the work. So when the opportunity comes, I can maximize that opportunity within the lifetime of that opportunity. Because if you miss the window now, you have to wait and hope it comes around again. And if you're not prepared, if you keep waiting for it to come to get prepared, you'll never get it. You will never get it. You have to prepare for it before it comes. For example, you have a platform that with what you do now with your podcast, and I'm sure before you did, you kind of pinch out, hey, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, and this is what I want to do. Would you be willing to hop on? Would you be willing to hop on? So before you probably even got on this stuff going, you probably had a few people in mind who was willing to be a part of it and get started. And but you had the infrastructure in place, so it makes it kind of easy. You didn't wait and say, hey, if I do a podcast, would you join? Yeah, okay. Let me see if I get another 10 people. No, you start doing the groundwork first, and when the opportunities come, you can maximize it, right? So those would be the pointers I would give. Well, that's any industry. Prepare yourself for the opportunities. Work hard. You know, show that you can be reliable. I'm a former student athlete, so I'm very big on structure. I remember one of my coaches would tell me in high school, when production is high, tolerance is high. When your production goes low, my tolerance for you will go low. So you keep your production high as far as what you produce, how you interact with people and your relationships with people. The tolerance for you will be high. People will want somebody like that around. Like you said, you just met me the first time we actually spoke, but you said you just have a good, hey, you just have a good vibe, Rodrigo. And there's a lot of people out there like that, right? So you keep that going, you keep that production high where you produce with your KPIs and stuff that at work, but then you also produce on the social aspect. And doing those things would make people want to be around you. Like I said, started off in Bahamas, did an interview, saw a gentleman who was super excited. What if I look at him and be like, bro, you're so excited, you don't know nothing. What if I was negative towards him? No, I asked, hey, did you work here before? No. But my brother worked here. Oh, okay. He's doing this. Okay, no problem. Cool. But when I got the opportunity, I took advantage of it. That opens up now another opportunity with his big brother, right? Who's in Singapore. Gets me there. But when I get there, I still continue to work. I didn't like sit on my loins and just, oh, I'm here now. No, I continued the same structure that I was using to get there. I kept it going. I worked. Only I worked harder because I had more responsibilities. But the social aspect I kept going, because you never know where you can end up in life and who is connected to who, or what opportunities might come around. So you have to treat people the way that you want to be treated. And simple life lessons, stuff that we learned growing up as kids. Be respectful, say thank you. You can disagree, but you don't have to be volatile. Simple stuff like that you learn, that you keep with you. And like I said, I go from Singapore, and then same thing. Somebody now reach out to me to come to Dubai now. Hey, I know you're in Singapore. Would you come be a part of this? And that will help you with your elevation and help you to be success, regardless of the industry. Work hard, you know, keep your get your social dynamics good with people, and prepare for opportunities before they come, so that when they come, because they will come, when they come, you're ready to take advantage of those opportunities. If not, you're gonna miss out.
I love it. There's some solid, really, really solid life advice there, my friend. And as you say, it applies to any industry. That's the really cool thing. I mean, I hope that this inspires people in your industry who are already getting into it, or people who will get into it. But even so, even in entirely different careers, these principles still apply. And having the correct values, really, really, really cool. We've spoken about some great topics today. I appreciate you very, very much for speaking from the heart and being such an open book, and being just so much fun to talk with today. I have to go because I gave myself an hour and we're an hour 20. No complaints from me at all. I've enjoyed it so much that the time has just gone by in a flash. The time has gone by so quick, and I mean that. Honestly, it's been a joy. And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I want to say, great job. I love your passion. I love your power. The world needs more people with passion like you have. And the way that your eyes light up when you're talking about all of these things, it's absolutely wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling. So I'll send this to you as well when I release it. So I'll get it out there, my YouTube, social media, everything. But I'll send it to you as well. So if you've got any uses your side, feel free to share it around. And other than that, we'll keep in touch. And I would love to see where
Yeah,
things go
definitely will.
from this point. Absolutely. I'd love to see the progression. But for now, you have a great day, have a great weekend. And just thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, Rodrigo. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
And you have a great one. Keep in touch anytime. Take care. Bye bye.
All right. Okay.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.